Welcome back to my fake podcast. It's a fake podcast just because it's not real. That's what fake means. And I have mics, and therefore I invite people I love to come on and talk about things that I really care about. Today we're talking to Isla Morley, the author of The Last Blue, which comes out on May 5th, 2020, and we are approaching that day very soon. And I'm so excited because I read this book maybe a month ago, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I read it just in a few days, and I was crying, and I loved it so much, which is why I'm dedicating these fake podcasts to The Last Blue. Welcome to the fake podcast.
Thank you.
I just sort of rambled on for a second.
You did. you keep rambling. You don't need me.
No, yeah, I'll just film myself rambling about the book. Today, this episode of the fake podcast is about love, because who doesn't like talking about love? It's about love at first sight. And I think in movies sometimes we see someone fall in love so fast and we think, this is too fast. Who falls in love that fast, right? I think this is sort of a common complaint. And the truth is, Isla and I are believers that you can fall in love in an instant. Briefly about my own story, I have a whole video dedicated to my love story with Eric because I like our story. I think we are cute. And we fell in love very, very quickly, and I knew I was going to marry him, and he knew too, but he was so scared. He didn't say anything for a long time, and then I had to go off to Italy, but still we were so in love that I jeopardized my whole job over there, and I was a terrible au pair because I was so in love. Love can really ruin your life in a way.
Absolutely.
And funnily enough, I have never heard Isla's love story with Bob, with your husband. And I'm so curious to hear about it because yours was not love at first sight. Yours was love at first
touch.
Tell me everything.
So it's a wild story. You can hear I've got an accent. It's because I lived half a world away in South Africa. And I had no intention of ever coming to America, and yet here I am, and love will do that. Mm-hmm. So how it started for me and Bob was on a pulpit exchange, which means that our minister at our church switched pulpits with Bob, and he came to preach at our church for, I think it was 2 months, in the July of 1994. So the reason why I don't tell our love story all that often is because we've been married 25 years, so this is just a real trip down memory lane.
For sure.
But all that electricity and sparkle is still there. So I was volunteering to do some youth work in the church. And because Bob had come, and he was a big dignitary, we decided that we would host an event for all the youth workers and for Bob, so we could have a more intimate gathering, a social gathering, and get to know him. And I had a friend who recently got divorced. She was older than me. And I knew that Bob was single. I'd never met him. He preached at the early morning service, and I went to the evening service. I never really had any interaction with him. But it was coming down to like his last couple of weeks before he was going to return to the States. And so we were at this gathering, and I thought, he's single. My friend is recently divorced. They would make such a great couple. So I started scheming that I would get them together, and it involved like this elaborate scheme of like how they would sit when they had their food together. And somehow when the moment came, everybody took their seats, and the last available seat was for me, holding my plate right next to Bob. And actually, he was sitting on the floor, and I had to sit on the couch kind of next to him. So I was undeterred. I was there with my boyfriend. He was on the other side of the room. And like in South Africa, it's kind of polite society. You don't pry. You don't ask personal questions, especially at kind of informal gatherings like this. So everybody's sitting, and I just decided that I would like go on the attack. So I asked Bob, hey, so you're not married. Is there a reason for that? Mm-hmm. And he kind of turned around. He was a bit surprised by the question. And then he came up with this kind of rambling answer of how some people kind of are better suited towards helping other people when they're single. And if you get married and you have a family, that kind of distracts you. And I wasn't buying because I had my eye on my friend, and I just thought that don't worry, it's going to happen for you guys. Yeah. So I kept pursuing these questions, and eventually I think he was a bit annoyed. So he turned around and we engaged in a one-on-one conversation, and the rest of the room kind of went back to their own conversations. And he was really interesting to talk to. Mm-hmm. And we just were rambling on about all sorts of conversations. And I thought, he's really nice for an American.
What does that mean, Isla?
I grew up with all these misconceptions about Americans, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But while we were talking, he just reached over and he brushed a piece of hair off my cheek. And it was like, I know this sounds corny, but it was like this curtain lifted.
Yeah.
And the words in my mind were, oh, it's you that I'm going to marry.
Whoa.
It's you. And I was 25 at the time. I had a boyfriend on the other side of the room.
What?
I know, that's what I was thinking. This can't be real.
Yeah.
And what am I thinking? Because this guy is an American, and oh, by the way, he's 25 years older than me.
Oh, yeah. Little May December going on there.
Yeah. So immediately I excused myself from the conversation. I just thought this can't happen. And I made some excuse, and I got up abruptly, and I got my boyfriend, and we were just out of there. And the whole night I was thinking, you need to stop these thoughts right now from progressing. And I didn't know that Bob was having the same reaction. He didn't know what was happening to him. And now that we've been married 25 years, I can tell you, like, Bob isn't one of those touchy-feely, very affectionate people. So he said when his hand did that, it was like it belonged to somebody. He was just thinking, oh my word, what have I just done? I've just reached over and touched this woman's cheek in such an intimate way.
Yeah.
And he was thinking, who is she? Who is this woman? And so the next Sunday we saw each other at church, and I made sure I was right at the back of the line, that filters out of the church. He was shaking hands with everybody. And so I made sure I was right at the end of the line. And we were like shaking hands. And I don't know what we were saying. We were just shaking hands.
Over and over.
And I was working for a magazine at the time. Mm-hmm. And he found out where I was working. And Monday morning, the receptionist patched through a call. But she said to me, Isla, there's this man. He's got an American accent. Who is he? He wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, no, I don't know. She's like, what is going on? I said, just put him through. And then I was listening to Bob's beautiful voice, mm-hmm. and he asked me to go to this film festival with him. And I said, no. And then he said, well, could we have dinner sometime? And I said, no.
Did he know you had a boyfriend?
Yeah, I think he knew. Yeah.
Okay.
And so he got the hint that, like, he mustn't pursue this. Mm-hmm. And then that whole week I thought, like, what am I doing? What's so bad about having coffee with him? Mm-hmm. And besides, the receptionist was saying to me, oh my gosh, are you going to marry him? Are you going to move to America and have his babies? Yeah. And I'm like, I think I'll just have some coffee.
Yeah.
And so we met eventually like a week later. And this is 10 days before he has to fly back to the United States.
Yeah, this is so similar to me and Eric. It's like there's that pressure of time, and we need to make some sort of decision. And I just need to see you every day.
And you can't put on any airs and graces. Like, if you have the luxury of time,
right.
It's that whole like fakey courtship thing that you do, and you just present like your most perfect self. And we couldn't do that.
Yeah, when Eric didn't kiss me on our third date, I gave him the hardest time. I was like, really? You're walking away and you're not kissing me? Are you? I leave in 2 weeks, man. Come on.
And Bob kissed me on the forehead like the first time. I'm like, what is this forehead kiss?
You're like, yes.
You're going
You
tomorrow.
missed. Yeah.
So in that whole week, I had been thinking about him, and you know that thing where you can't reason yourself out of something.
Yeah, it's so illogical. Like falling in love is like the most illogical thing, especially when they're 25 years older than you, they live in a different continent, and you can't stop thinking about it.
And it's so scandalous as well. You know
Right.
that everybody's going to disapprove.
Yeah.
And that isn't me. I'm not one of those impetuous people and impulsive. So everybody it would have reflected badly on Bob. They would have thought like, oh,
Right.
He
seduced her. Yeah.
Yeah.
This young girl.
Yeah. And in the meantime, in that week, I'd written a poem about my experience and my feelings. And so we get to Dulcie's on Ring Street in Port Elizabeth. And the woman that normally serves us coffee, she comes over and she sees that I'm not with my boyfriend. So she's giving Bob all kinds of bad vibes. And so while she's making our coffee, he says, I've written a poem for you. And I'm shuffling in my handbook and I go, I have a poem for you. So we switched poems and I couldn't believe what I was reading about this kind of vulnerability on the page.
Yeah.
And he said to me, there are 3 reasons why we can't be together, and you just talked about them. And I just said, oh, and he said, you have a boyfriend? Mm-hmm. And I said, I'll be right back. I'm going to take care of that right now. So when we parted, I went and broke up with my boyfriend, and Bob and I had 6 days left before he was going to fly off to the US. And at the same time, I was getting 2 magazines out. Mm-hmm. So I had deadlines and I was working late every night. And at the same time, every person at the church, especially all the single women, were all having Bob over for their like casserole dinner. Mm-hmm. And so we would have these sneaky secret meetings that we would meet up like at 10 o'clock at night. And we had until...
I love love so much. I'm smiling so hard.
dawn the next morning.
Yeah.
And we would kind of creep apart.
Oh, yeah.
And
you just never sleep. Why would you sleep?
I never told anybody. Yeah. And when we met, he said, just come with me. Just fly with me. I'm like, I can't do that.
This is a movie, Isla.
No, I have my life, I have my career, my work, my family. It was also 1994, so we had just had the first free election. It was just such an exciting time to be in South Africa, and I said, I can't do that. So then we bargained, and he said, well, come and visit me. So I bought a ticket to spend 3 weeks with him in San Diego in September that year. And it was this a case of saying, is this real? Was this just like a summer fling? Mm-hmm. Or is it really the case that we both feel that this is our destiny, that we were meant to find each other?
Yeah.
And 3 weeks later, I went home with a ring on my finger.
Oh my gosh.
And a month later, he flew out 3 days before the wedding, and we got married.
You got married how soon after meeting?
Well, we met in the July.
Yeah.
The 1st of July, I think we met, and we got married the 10th of December. And in that 6-month time span, we were only ever in the same geographic area for 4 weeks.
You've just told us this really visceral, true love story that's, successful in a way. You're still married and still very happy in a way. Very successful love story. I just don't like that word that I used. But the reason it's so interesting with the book that is coming out is that this is a love story, and they fall in love very quickly. And it's so natural for an audience to sort of say, but it's too fast. And when you first sent your book to your agent had feedback. And one of the things that she said was, they fall in love a little fast. it's not believable, right? That people don't fall in love that fast. What was your reaction to that?
Well, first I wanted to argue with her, but you can't argue with New York agents.
No.
But I also wanted to keep that sense that Bob and I had had. And if you've fallen in love in the way that you have or in the way that I have, or you've heard about it, your parents maybe, you know that it's real. So I wanted to keep that element, but I did understand that I had to bring out some of the other things, some of the things that made them companions, that made them compatible. Mm-hmm. So I just had to kind of pay attention to making sure that was in that early situation. Otherwise, you know, the risk was that they are just attracted to each other because of their otherness. Like with me and Bob, I could have just been attracted to him because he was an American, he had that accent, and he was a foreigner, and he could have felt the same for me. Right. And I didn't want the photographer to be falling in love with her because of her blue skin.
Right.
Or the fact that she's unique. And I didn't want her to be falling for him because he's this outsider, is unlike any other man that is part of that world that she only knows.
So after your agent gave you that feedback, you didn't say anything to her like, yes, too, it's possible type of thing?
Well, you try that when you get an agent and see how far it gets you.
But what you did then, your reaction was to just make it even more believable in the characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had to show instances in those early stages of what would have been part of that attraction.
Right. Yeah. And then writing a love story in general, which there's so much to say about how to write a love story, and I've never written a love story actually. I don't think I've ever really written people falling in love. But I think we've seen it so much because it's a very popular trope in commercial fiction as well as in movies. But a literary love story, how does that change? How does that go deeper? How did you write a literary novel but make it a love story?
Well, I think that you have to draw on your own experiences. So it would be natural for you to write a love story, by the way, because there's so much emotional resource there.
Yeah.
And that's what I tapped into. When you're writing a love story, I think you have to remember what it's like when you're first in love. That, first of all, there's all this wishing that's involved.
Yeah.
Like you just wish that person would look at you just for a moment. If you can just see their face, or then you're wishing that they would just talk to you, stop and talk to you. So all those kind of, and they increase, those wishes become even bigger.
A big one for me and Eric was wishing that we didn't have to leave each other, you know?
Right.
I wish the night wouldn't end.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you can flesh those out and then highlight all the disappointments, because that's so much a factor of love. Like you're having these crushing moments all the time. He does stop and talk to you for the first time. You've been waiting and wishing for this, but now suddenly somebody else is coming and interrupting that. So to kind of convey that and have this wave of wishing and disappointments kind of going in an increasingly pronounced wave throughout the story kind of drives this momentum.
I think this conversation is so interesting because I love love. There's a really good song I'm going to send you this afternoon by The Format, and it goes, I love love. I love being in love. I don't care what it does to me. And that's how I feel about love too. And I love hearing people's love stories. And I don't read literary love stories very often.
You don't hear of them very much.
And I think it may be that people think it's, it's fluffy or it's commercial or it's not worth writing about, but it is. It's such a human experience to fall in love. And anyway, this is why you need to read the book, everyone. This is the audience of my fake podcast. Please pick up The Last Blue, pre-order it. As I said in the last episode, one of the best things you could do to support an author is pre-ordering it during the publication time so that everyone knows that we're interested in this book and go on Goodreads. I've written a review there. It's not as maybe effusive as the email that I sent you after I read it, where I was like tears slashing my keyboard. I love this book so much. Anyway, the end. And please tune in to our next podcast. I promise I'll be a little less rambly and awkward. I don't know why I'm so energetic right now.
It's talking about love.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm like, I'm feeling I'm in the moment of falling in love.
We need to go off camera so that we can go and embrace someone and
Yes.
have like a real passionate moment.
I'm gonna hold your cat.
I've got another cat to hold.
Perfect. Bye.